All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of my podcasting about it. I'm Amir, as you all already know, and I have a special guest with me today, Adeline. Hi, Adeline. How are you doing today?
Hi, Amir. How are you?
A few interesting points about Adeline that the audience should know before we get into the whole podcast, which is about finding your voice, growth, transition, and speech. Adeline is uh, to my amazement, two-time Singapore national speech champion. She's represented Singapore in the World Championship in public speaking. She's a past president of Toastmasters Club of Singapore and had a very varied and illustrious career. So, Adeline, maybe you could start telling me and the audience about who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing now.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Amir. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. So, yes, when you come to my age, you realize how many things you've done. And I understand a lot of your audience members are new in their career. So, maybe this will also shed light on how your career could progress. So, I actually graduated in law and the Asian dream, right? And I practiced law for about 2 years and I realized that's not quite what I wanted to do. And so from there, I went into consulting with McKinsey and Company. I was actually employee number 9 in the Singapore office many, many years ago. I stayed in consulting for a while. Then I went to Harvard in the US to get my MBA. And then I stayed on in the in the US, working in various jobs, mostly in senior management roles in the consumer goods space. And that's what I did all the way till about 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, I left the corporate world and I became an entrepreneur. I now run a mental health trauma therapy platform with my husband. And one thing that I'm working on right now is as I've looked back and I realized all the transitions in my life, I realized that actually life is really a series of transitions, but no one teaches us the skills to manage these. And so I'm now on a mission to start a community of people in transition so that we can share our experiences, we can learn these skills to help us through our next transitions, and to be able to reframe transitions as a very fertile ground for a new beginning, for the new us. So that's what I'm working on now. My community is called Life in Pause because it's about helping people find the life in this pause that we can sometimes feel in a transition. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along.
Wow, I can relate totally. And I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the youth that we can relate as well. Because the most common transition that my friends and I always have to go through at this age is education to career. Because we have all graduated from Polytechnic or JC, going into university or going into our jobs. So we all trying to figure out what to do as well. Okay, so what are some of the earliest transitions in your life? Anything that was especially challenging that you want to share with us?
Well, what you mentioned, Amir, in terms of that first big transition, which most of us go through, which is leaving the formal structure of education, whether it's university, polytechnic, secondary school, leaving that structure and moving into the work world, that is a huge, huge transition. What I'd like to share is some of the things I've learned in making that transition, which is probably going to be your first major transition. And the skills you learn from that will be the ones that will set you up for all the future transitions, whether it's about changing careers, whether it's about taking a career break, whether it's even personal transitions. So, some of the skills that you can learn there, the first thing I would say, and it took me many, many years to learn this, is that change is not the same as transition.
Mm,
So the way to think about it is change is external. So change, you can say, okay, I'm going to start a new job on the 2nd of May, right? Or I'm moving to a new country on this date. It's typically very tangible, it's very known, and it's going to happen on that day. Something changes. You stop being this and you start being that. The problem is transitions. So transitions is actually the emotional impact of change. It's how we react to change as it happens. And the problem comes up when transitions don't move at the same pace as change. So, for example, you can say, okay, today I'm no longer a student. Today I start working at this company. But mentally, you may not be there yet. Mentally, you may still be hanging on to some parts of your old identity. Mentally and emotionally, you may also be trying to figure out what does this new world mean. So there's this whole period of emotional transition, psychological, emotional transition that we go through as a person. It's the human side of change. And many times for us, we're so excited about this external change that's happening, about getting a new job, about graduating, right? That we forget that actually we're not computers. We don't just switch off like that and emotionally become that new person at this stroke of this hour,
That's
right?
true. That's
It
quite
actually
true.
takes a time to go through that. So one thing I would say to your listeners and to anyone going through any transition, especially a major one like going from school to work, is to be easy on yourself, to recognize that it doesn't change on command, that you actually have to go through a period of adjustment emotionally. Very often it's hidden. So it's the emotions you feel and it's not apparent on the outside. It's not on your business card. It's not on your LinkedIn profile. But that process of getting used to who you no longer are and who you are, that takes time. And it's actually a staged process. And it happens, unfortunately, in its own time. So be kind to yourself and take the time to transition your emotions, not just the external transition.
These are some profound insights and examples that you've given us. Thank you so much. I, for one, no one's explained this so clearly to me before. So thank you. Um, Another question is, can you share one or two before versus after stories about your past experiences? You shared a bit about your experiences in working in the US and then jumping into entrepreneurship in the last 5 years. What contributed to that change? What was your thought process and experiences with regards to that?
Oh, that's a fascinating question, Amir. So as we go through life, one thing you'll realize is that life unveils itself as you go along. So one thing I do a lot is I work with university and polytechnic students. I mentor them as they enter the work world. And one question that often comes up is, oh my gosh, I don't know my purpose in life.
Hmm.
And my answer to that is, if you know your purpose in life at 22 or 23, what are you going to spend the rest of your life doing? Right? That's actually the beauty of life. It's how we uncover and we grow through life. And one thing I've realized is that we actually go through different stages of life. Very often on when you're early stage in your life, in your late teens, your early 20s, even your late 20s, a lot of that is around achievement orientation. It's around getting the job, around getting a bigger title, around getting, your first house, your first car, the status symbols around you. And that's okay. That's what all of us go through, especially in an Asian society. And I think we're programmed. In fact, we are programmed. And you look at philosophers who have thought about this in various different religious traditions, they talk about this, the different stages of life, right? And the early stage very often is around achieving and getting more done for yourself, achieving for yourself. When you reach a different stage in life, your focus then changes. It changes from the external focus of what I can get, what I can do more, what I can show more. It becomes more introspective. It becomes more, who am I as a person?
Mm.
What can I contribute? What do I want to spend the rest of my life, which becomes shorter and shorter? What do I want to
Yes.
spend
Yes.
that limited time doing for people around me? So less about what do I get for myself. And it's like everything in life, you can't rush it. If I try and explain that to my kids who are 10 and 7, they totally would not understand that, right? It
Yes.
actually takes. And I think even some of your listeners who may be early on in the stages, don't worry, you're not there yet, but one day you'll get to that. And maybe one day you'll remember what I say here. So, one thing I would encourage everyone is to listen to the signals from inside you. And inside you, you actually know when things are not quite right for you anymore. And you realize, it used to be so fun doing this, but I just don't have that excitement, that passion for doing it. And it's not that I'm no longer good at it, because if you've done something for 10, 15, 20 years, as I did, working in various roles in the corporate world, you get good at it, but you don't feel that same kind of passion and excitement. And you say, it's time for a change. And the challenge for most of us is we resist that change. We resist that change because we're good at doing it. We resist that change because it's what makes us feel proud of ourselves, good of ourselves. It's even what the people around us tell us to keep doing. They'll say, you have built this reputation, you've built all these skills, this networks. Why are you giving this up to do something where you're not known, where you don't even know how to do it? You're starting from ground zero. But that's part of life, because life is really not a destination, it's about the journey. And
Mm.
as you change, listen to your life, listen to that inner voice telling you, hey, I'm ready for that next stage in life, right? And then you move on to it. um, so coming back to the question that you asked me about big transitions in my life, one of these big transitions was leaving the corporate world. So this was right before COVID. It actually was 6 months before COVID. But to be fair, I had been thinking about it for a couple of years before that, because I knew that something was not quite right in what I was doing in the corporate world. It no longer gave me that sense of joy, that sense of excitement. And I was like, I'm just hanging on because that's what I think I should do. But life is not about shoulds. And it so turned out that, sometimes the universe gives you a little push when you're not willing to move on. And so I actually left the company on quite good terms, but it's because of a promotion that didn't come about. And it
Mm.
happened that at that time, I had just had my second child and I could not travel because of the pregnancy. And so the role that I was in line for required me to travel. And so because of that, I did not get that role. And I figured this is a good time for me to
Sounds like
leave
good
and
timing.
try
Sounds like
something
good
else.
timing.
Yes. So the universe will help to push you in different ways. So I left the corporate world. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, except I knew it wasn't what I was doing or going back to something similar to what I wanted to do. So I started helping my husband. My husband had started a business in mental health a few years before that. And it took a long time for him to get traction because mental health was so new at the time. And so a lot of people were pushing back in terms of the need. They didn't understand the need for mental health. They didn't understand that mental health could be delivered online, which is how the business was set up. And it so happened that pretty much right after I left the corporate world to help him scale up this business, COVID happened. This was
Ah.
this was 6 months after I left, and COVID happened. And if you can remember, because of COVID, the demand for mental health went through the roof, and because of all the restrictions, it became online. So online mental health went through the roof, right? And I was really in the right place at the right time to help him scale up that business. So it was the universe sending me a message.
A quote comes to mind when since you
Yes.
keep mentioning good timing in universe, right? When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even know that you want something, but it's your time and your space to do that. And actually, if I can just segue, because with many of your listeners who may be looking for a job or starting to look for a job or have started looking for a job and are not getting the results that they expected, maybe they're finding it much harder to find a job in the space that they were planning to be in and that you've studied maybe 3, 4, even 5, 6 years to do that. And suddenly you find that, okay, the jobs in this space are really more difficult, right? Here's one thing I would say. Sometimes the universe works in different ways. And sometimes by not getting what you want now, it actually helps you get what you want later. So, what I will say about that, about my own experience. So, leaving the corporate world, this was again at end of 2019, 2020, and the business was an online business. My whole life, I've never been a tech person. I'm the kind of person who IT will say it's you again, and my grandmother can do this better than you. And suddenly I had to teach myself digital marketing. I had to go and take Python classes.
Oh.
Uh, it was just needed, right? And because I was forced into that, I did not enjoy it necessarily. It wasn't something I was good at. But because I was forced into learning that, it actually set me up for now what I do because I have a few years head start in learning these new skills that if I had stayed on the path I was on before, I wouldn't have learned that skills. There was no need for me to learn those skills then. So sometimes the universe gives you these gifts, it may not look like a gift at the time. It may look like, why am I being punished?
Blessing in disguise.
It's a blessing in disguise. And so for some of your listeners who are thinking, okay, I've trained to be an accountant, but now I can't get an accounting job, or I trained to be a lawyer, and now it's really hard to find a low and a entry level legal job. So you sometimes think, okay, life is so unfair, right? I trained so hard for this, I invested so much in this. What I would say is, what can be the positive side of this? What are some skills that you can pick up now that are actually future ready skills rather than the past skills that you've invented? What are some of these future ready skills that you can train yourself now to do? Obviously, a lot of AI type skills are on there. And now, because you have the advantage of time, right? How can you start to use that time to learn these skills, go for courses, do it on your own, start a small business, try it on your own, and it will come back in future to be a skill that you're like, I'm so glad I took 2 months or 3 months or 6 months to build those skills that you wouldn't otherwise have the chance. And the people who went on the traditional path would not have that level of skills that you have. So that would be my one advice to anyone who's thinking, okay, why can't I find the job that I think I should be getting? Yeah.
I resonate fully with everything you've said. Well, a few things I wanted to mention is that feeling that we get when we need to do something else while we are doing something. Most of my audience will probably understand it as gut feeling. So you
Yes.
need to follow your gut feeling, and it never fails. It never ever fails. I speak
This
from experience too.
exactly. And the way you think about it is your body knows before your mind knows. Because your mind is logical, right? So in an example that we just talked about, someone who's trying to find a job and not having much luck, your
Mm,
mind tells you about the sunk costs. Your mind tells you, wow, you just spent X thousands of dollars and 4 years studying accountancy. You should be looking for an accounting job, right? Because it's a logical thing. You have the degree and you work really hard for it and you have certain knowledge in that area. If you listen to the universe, the gut or that inner voice, right, that sixth sense, whatever you want to call it, you actually say, you know what? These jobs are going to go away anyway. Whoever's getting those jobs now, uh, they're hanging on to the last part of the old world. The new world is going to have a completely different way of doing things. So why don't I build the skills for that new world? Yes, it's painful to let go of the investment, the sunk cost investment that I've put in
mm.
this career that I thought I was going to have. But what's your choice? Your choice is to keep chasing the remnants of what's available there, knowing that at most you're delaying maybe a 2 year, 3 year, you know, thing for the delay before the inevitable. Or you can say, I have a 2 year head start to get there faster because I'm going to build those skills now. Yeah. And I'll give you an example. So I have a coach, and my
Sure.
coach was telling me yesterday, he was saying, when you look across history at all the industries that have disappeared overnight,
Mm,
and there are many, many industries that have disappeared overnight. One very simple example from about maybe 100 to 200 years ago was actually the horse and carriage system, right?
mm.
So at the time, horse and carriage, people had invested a lot in building stables and buying horses and building carriages and all that, right? And then one day the motor car was invented, right? And it would take a while before the motor car totally took over everything, but it was not as long as you thought. It was a matter of years rather than that. Now you can say, I spent years and years building the stables, I spent years and years training the horses and all that. So I am going to really, really start I'm really going to get a job in the horse and carriage business. Great. Maybe you'll get one for a year or 2 years, but at some point in time, it's going to get gone, to be gone, right? So aren't you better off thinking about what's next? About, hey, you know what? It's now the motor car era. Let me learn how to win in that era, whether it's learning how to drive, learning how to repair cars, learning how to build gas stations instead of horse and carriage stables,
Learning how to adapt, lah. Basically, learning how
learning
to
how to adapt
adapt.
and looking forward rather than say, I have this sunk cost and I want to protect it at all means. And the logical mind will tell you that. Your more conservative people around you will tell you that, oh, you spend so much time, so much money doing that. You must make full use of it. Why? Why not get the head start instead on the new world?
The audience, I have something to say to the audience with
Yes.
regards to this. Something that clicked. I think it sounds right to say it this way. It takes the courage to do something different that truly interests you and makes you fulfilled after you're done with the corporate life. So we have that decade of corporate life that you have to work whatever you work with whatever degree you get. Then you do what Adeline did here and you move into whatever you want to really do.
Here's my yes, and I would actually challenge that a little because you have my experience, and I worked in the corporate world for about 25 years. So I graduated almost 30 years ago. So
Damn.
I'm one whole generation older than you. So you have my experience, and yes, that was a fairly typical path, right? People would go out and they would make success of themselves in the corporate world, and then after 30 years, they decide I want to do something that I'm more fulfilled by, whether it's starting a restaurant, a yoga studio, travel the world, an entrepreneur, whatever it is, right? And that was a model that worked. But I'm also a mother of two young children. And so one thing that I think about is what I would advise them,
Mm,
right? And I do think that that world that I grew up in it's not going to exist. I mean, for sure, it's not going to exist for them by the time they finish their schooling. If they finish their schooling, and I'll come to that in a while. But even for people your listeners who are graduating in the next 2 to 4 years, the world is already going to be very, very different, right? So to me, don't just follow the models of the previous generation because that world may not even exist anymore. You can look at them and you can say what are some things that they did, but to assume that the conditions for which that model worked are still there, that is quite a big assumption. I would actually say, let me figure out from this. This is one point. This is one point of reference, but there are many points of reference for me to figure out what the model can be for me in the future world. So, not just taking the model from the past world. And so my point there is it's not so much about working in the corporate world to get experience. The experience is still important, but whether you get it from the corporate world, I think it's going to change. We've seen the number of jobs, obviously, especially entry level jobs, have really, really decreased. Right in 30 years ago when I graduated, it was very industrial. It was still very industrial revolution kind of model. So a lot of big companies would come, whether they were consumer goods companies, consulting companies, accounting companies, even law firms, they would come to campus and they would recruit big batches of students, sometimes
mm,
100, sometimes three or 400, depending on the industry. A lot of these companies are not going to do it at that scale anymore. And even if they do it at that scale, the kind of career progression that they have going forward is not going to be the same kind of career progression that they offered to a
that's
previous
true.
generation, right?
Because from the Industrial Revolution, we're now in the AI revolution.
Exactly. So it's a totally different world. And so I think, don't assume that the same kind of model will still be there. And as we talked about, sometimes getting that is not the blessing because that keeps you stuck in the old world, the more
Mm,
industrial revolution kind of world. Sometimes not getting that job actually forces you to go faster into the future, right? So I think for me, the key part that I would say to my kids, as well as to my younger the mentees that I mentor, who are a lot of them are in university, I would say to them, it's important to get the experience. But you don't have to look to a corporate job to get the experience. In fact, you should create the opportunities to get the experience because that's the one thing you can control yourself, right? You can control whether or not you get that experience, whether it's by starting your own small business. It can be a side hustle if you're already in a job, but getting that volunteer community,
can
it
you
can.
repeat everything you said like 30 seconds ago?
Okay,
It got stuck.
so okay, so sometimes the most important thing to realize is that a model that worked for a previous generation may not exist anymore or
Mm,
may not even be a model of success even if it exists. So a simple example is when I graduated many, many years ago, the large companies would come to campus and they would recruit en masse, right? So sometimes they recruit 50, 100, 200 people, accounting firms, legal firms, consulting firms, and then all the big industrial companies like consumer goods. They
yep,
would come
yep.
and they would recruit the next batch. As we go forward, for sure, that is going to shrink and very often will disappear. Now, you might think that if I can get one of those few remaining jobs, then I'm on the winning ticket.
Nah.
But exactly, because that is actually tying you to a model that may not work anymore.
Mm,
And even if you get into the firm, the structure of progression in that firm will change from some of the models of people from the past generation. So rather than tie yourself to the past generation, why not think about what it's going to look like going forward, right? What is the world going to be? And one thing, Amir, you said is about the old model was about getting experience in the corporate world. So I agree with half of that, and I disagree with the other half. So the half I agree is it's all about getting experience, 100%. Your goal all the time is to get experience
But
and to get.
perhaps not from the corporate world.
Exactly. So definitely keep getting experience, right? Your whole goal is to keep getting experience, and the person who gets the most experience fastest and learns from that experience, because you're going to make mistakes. Experience are actually also mistakes. Who learns from that the fastest, that's the person who's going to come out ahead. Okay. So definitely experience. You don't want to be sitting at home doing nothing just because I don't have a job and no one called me back. No, you want to get experience. Go out there, get it. Volunteer organizations, start your own side hustle, help your friend, help your husband. For me, whatever it is, get that experience. The other side that I said I disagree with, and you got it, Amir, is don't look to the corporate world to do that, because number one, they are also trying to figure out what their model is, and companies don't hire until they have a certain amount of certainty, right? So because when they hire someone, they don't just hire someone for 1 week or 2 months or 3 months. They're looking for people longer term. In the meantime, they'll use contractors. So that world is also not very certain because they also don't know what is happening. So and secondly, it's out of your control. If you're relying on someone to call you back and give you a job, you don't have a lot of control over that, right? Because anyone who's been through a recruiting cycle, as I have many times, you'll know that sometimes you're the best person and you're the best experience and you have the best culture fit and everything. And then for whatever reason, headquarters says, okay, we have a hiring freeze. It's nothing to do with you. It's nothing personal to do with you. It happens all the time. Or the person who wants to hire you, for some reason, they left the company and now you have to restart the whole cycle and the new person doesn't like you. That's very, very common. The whole point is it's outside your circle. You do what you can, outside your control. You do what you can, but you can't control that. But getting experience through your own initiative, you can take control of that. So that's what I would encourage your listeners to do. Get as much experience as you want. That part is still there. It's still very important. In fact, it will never go away because that's what makes us human. That's what makes us valuable. It's the experience that we can bring. So go get the experience and don't wait for someone else, whether it's a company or employer, to do that. Go and find the experiences yourself. And through that, you'll learn a lot more about yourself and you also build incredibly valuable skills.
Absolutely beautifully explained. Transitions
In many,
beautifully
many
explained.
words.
Wow.
Yes.
This is in a way a mini lecture for those who want to learn about this as well. So you
Okay.
better listen like 2 to 3 times to this podcast to get everything she said. All right, let's move on to the next segment, which is more on speeches, voice, and practice. So
Yes.
I'm gonna ask a very common question that people in my generation and people in my like-minded group usually ask. Many people fear speaking in public. So how do you overcome that? And are there any specific strategies?
Ooh, okay.
Yes, very common.
Uh, yes. So you are right. So I've been in Toastmasters now 5 years. I actually joined it shortly after I left the corporate world.
Mm,
And my reason for joining Toastmasters was slightly different from most people. So 95% of the people who joined Toastmasters joined because I don't want to stand on stage. I'm terrified. I'll forget. People will laugh at me. It's very, very common, right? For me, it's a bit different. For me, I actually had a lot of experience speaking in public because of my corporate experience over many, many years. What I wanted was more a structure to a community that I could connect with because I had left the corporate world and it's a huge difference going from a very big corporate environment, which was where I was. I was working for one of the biggest companies, a very well-known soft drink brand. So going from that kind of very structured environment to a really startup, very, very free for all. And it gets lonely. And so for me, I was looking for a community was one reason what attracted me to Toastmasters. On the speaking front, though, the one thing I wanted to do was not so much get over the fear of speaking, but was to have more impact
mm.
when I speak. So it's not
Well,
just
a person with your level of wisdom and experience will want to impart more knowledge, I suppose. It's the impact that would concern you more.
I think for all of us, at every level, it's not what you say, but what impact you
Yeah,
have.
impact's
And
important.
actually, if I can share something. So when I moved from Singapore to the US,
Mm.
I grew up in the Singapore education system. I studied here all the way until JC. And then I went to do my law degree in the UK, and then I went to the US. And the US was so different from the Singapore education system, especially Harvard. So in Singapore, the person who studies the hardest, who does the most number of 10-year series, who reads the book over and over again and memorizes and has the most beautiful notes and has all the information up there, that person's going to score the A, right? Because typically 90% of your marks come from the written part, whether it is composition or whether it's some MCQ or solving some problems. So typically 90 to 100% is all from the knowledge, okay? In the US, it was completely flipped. In the US, it was all about how well you can present your ideas. So I actually had some friends in my class, they would hardly study. Like literally, they would be out partying all night. They were launching new businesses on the side. They were doing all these amazing things. But then in class, they would raise their hand and then they would speak very, very confidently. And I was like, this guy didn't study like 1/10 of what I studied. But because he raised his hand and spoke eloquently and convincingly, he got the A. And the people who studied all night and didn't have a social life and did all that, but was so afraid to raise our hands, we didn't get the A.
That's really
So,
quite interesting, actually, because I have no idea how the education system in US works. This is
and
something to learn from.
and it's not all, but definitely in the US, people are encouraged a lot more to speak up. So
Mm.
you'll find that it's not about the person who has the most knowledge, but about the person who can present it the best. And that's what I call impact. When you present your ideas and people think about it, people remember it, people question it about how it applies to their life, to me, that's impact. The impact is not because I know all these amazing things in my head, but it doesn't come out well, right? So that's one thing that I went to Toastmasters for. It was
Mm.
actually to speak less but have more impact. uh and that's one thing I highly encourage all of your listeners early on in your life. Overcome the fear of speaking, right? And it's really not that difficult. It is a skill, and like any other skill, which is like riding a bicycle, playing the piano, if you do it often enough, you'll get better at it.
Practice makes perfect, people.
Practice makes progress. Practice makes progress.
Progress.
Yeah.
Progress. All
It's
right.
because don't think about perfection. A lot of times you say, oh, I can't speak on stage like Tony Robbins. I can't speak on stage like Barack Obama. Why do you want to speak like them? You don't need to speak like that. You just need to be better than who you were yesterday, right? So if yesterday you're afraid to go on stage, today you can go on stage and you can say and you can speak 1 minute without falling off the stage or like your face going red. That's progress. That's great. And then tomorrow you take another step from that, right?
Mm.
So every step by step, you'll get better. Don't compare yourself to the best speakers in the world. No, they have 20 years of experience, they have 25 years of experience ahead of you. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, and if you make progress on that. So one piece of advice I would give to your listeners is start working on your communication skills. It's not about speaking perfect English. It's about making sure that when you speak,
Your
even
message
if
is
you speak
delivered.
very little, exactly, you have the impact. Your message is delivered. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about, sounding like Queen's English. That's not important, right? What's important is the message lands. If you want to share some knowledge, that message lands. And so going to a place like Toastmasters, which is a volunteer organization, so it's very affordable to everybody. And there are also many, many Toastmasters clubs, including in schools, in community centers. It's very accessible, right? So if you go to a Toastmasters club, that's where you learn to practice these skills of communication. And then you can see, how do I make this land? And you'll learn things. And these were things that I learned when I joined Toastmasters 5 years ago. Because in 25 years in the corporate world, I didn't have time to do a lot of these impact skills. I could speak confidently, but not a lot of impact. And so I learned things like, what's the message? Start with the message. What's the message that I want to deliver, right? And then the second thing is, how do I support that with a story, especially a personal story? Because people will remember stories, they will not remember bullet points, and they will not
Mm.
remember many facts. But they'll remember the story. And then if you have a very clear, simple message, especially if it's a catchy message, like what we said, practice, what practice helps, practice makes progress, right? So if you have a very catchy message, practice makes progress, and then a story behind it, That's what people will remember.
Something I learned during my experience of speaking on stage as well is that it needs to connect with the audience. So
Correct.
if you can connect with your audience with a hook, then the first part of the speech is technically jackpot done.
Yes, 100%. I mean, see, you got all that. And I know you're about to join Toastmasters. You've come to a lot of our meetings. You're about to join Toastmasters. That's good. Like I said, it's progress, right? Wherever you are, you come to meetings is better than not coming to meetings. And then the next step is you join a club, and then you start doing your speeches, and then you get a mentor to help you. So what you mentioned is completely true, right? How do you connect with the audience? You connect through stories. You connect through uh your own journey. People want to see your own journey, and they don't want to hear all your success stories. They want to hear your failures, actually, because your failures are what connect you to the audience. If you stand on the stage and you tell people all the amazing things you have and how much money you have and how many cars and how many houses you have, the audience, they don't respect, or they might respect you for that, but they don't like you, right? They'll think that he or she is a, put in your favorite expletive word there, right? But if that person shares his or her story, his or her journey of getting there, and that journey for most of us is a journey of discovery, is a journey of failure, it's a journey of knowing all the things that we did wrong. That's life, right? If you share that, people connect with you and people say, wow, I really not just respect her or him, I like her or him. And he or she feels very authentic, feels very genuine, very vulnerable, willing to help. I can see me in her or him, and I want to follow their story too.
Beautiful, beautifully said. I can think of three main words to take away from this entire bit of explanation that Alan's given for everyone to remember: connection, impact, and message.
Yes,
I follow this mean structure when I give my speeches as well, and more often than not, the speeches goes as well as they can go.
very nice. And that's why you host a podcast, and that's why you're going to be a Toastmaster soon, right?
Yes. I'm just not a member yet because of my schedule. Otherwise, I would have become a member already.
Understand.
Yeah.